Valve is launching the Steam Machine in early 2026, but are they going to be able to hit the price point that everyone wants to pay, or are RAM prices going to cook them? Welcome back to PC Builder. I'm Jason. This is our December 2025 Q&A part 2. We're going to answer that question as well as are DDR4 CPUs like the Ryzen 5600 and i5 12400 coming back to save PC gaming? What are the motherboard brands that I like the best? And when is the RAM crisis actually going to end? If you get value out of this video, please give it a like. It makes a huge difference to the channel. Of course, subscribe for more cool PC content. Let's jump into it. This video is sponsored by VIP SCD Key. Say goodbye to crazy expensive Windows licenses and that terrible Activate Windows watermark. Right now, use the links in the video description, head over to VIP SCD Key and get a Windows 11 OEM license for a great price. Pick your product license, then use the PC Builder discount code PC25 for an additional 30% off. Go to the activation settings on your PC, put in the code, and boom! Windows is fully licensed for a crazy low price. And they have Microsoft Office licenses too. Use the links in the video description. We got a lot of questions about the Steam Machine. How much is it gonna cost? Is it gonna save PC gaming? All the RAM price is gonna destroy it? That's what Clinton S wants to know. Do you think that people will switch to Steam gaming and not build mid or high-end PCs? By the way, Clinton S, I just want to shout out, you're a channel member. If you want to become a channel member, we do all kinds of fun live streams. We got a Discord and all that. You can click the join button down there. And then Jervil is asking, what do I think of the products that are planned to release in 2026, specifically the Steam Machine, and then a lot of GPUs and CPUs that we'll talk more about both in this video and also some additional dedicated content pieces. But let's stick with the Steam Machine here. Let's just look at their marketing in terms of what the clear intent is. Now, for those that don't know, the Steam Machine is being put out by Valve that owns Steam, which is where everybody buys all their games these days. Not only is it going to be a dedicated little box itself, this is basically the box right here, right? And to me, this is just judging from the marketing materials, they're going after a console kind of adjacent audience that also would maybe like to do a little bit more than just console game out there. But we'll go through the specs in just a second. What they're promising here is 4K gaming at 60 FPS with FSR, thanks to a discrete semi-custom AMD desktop class CPU and GPU. Let's look at the storage, by the way, 512 gigs and a 2 terabyte version. Let's take a look at the actual specs for this thing. So here they are. Zen 4 CPU. What is Zen 4? That's Ryzen 7000. And it's going to come with more of a mobile solution. You can see a 30 watt TDP. By comparison, a Ryzen 7600 or 7600X has a 65 watt TDP. So it's not a desktop level, it's more like a laptop level CPU. And then the same with the GPU. It's an RDNA 3 that's like Radeon RX 7000 series GPUs. 28 compute units is exactly the same amount in the Radeon RX 7600 non-XT GPU, but it is a 110 watt TDP. So it's a mobile powered unit, because if we look at the specs here for, I already pulled this up for the RX 7600, and we just take a look at the overall wattage, you can see right here, 165 watt TDP is what you get on RX 7600 non-XT GPU. Versus the, what did they say, 110? So it's already cut down from there. So you're not going to get the full performance of that. But what kind of performance would you get from our RX 7600? I looked at the RTX 5050 review by TechSpot. I'll link that down in the video description if you want to check out kind of more on a per game basis. And this will give you some idea maybe of the upper bound of where this thing might go. But essentially at 1440p across 18 games at higher ultra details. Now, here's the thing. You're not going to run this at higher ultra details. You're probably going to run it more medium level details out there. That's how you're going to get those higher frame rates. 42 average FPS. And remember, this is a full 165 watt discrete desktop one as opposed to a more mobile solution that they're pushing. And this is obviously with a 9800 X3D or high-end CPU as well. It's not the 30 watt mobile CPU, which can bottleneck you at times. What is the performance equivalent about that? I'd say probably like an RTX 5050 level of performance is what this thing will be looking at. Obviously, they're going to use some tricks like they do with the PlayStation and other things to kind of get that frame rate to a more acceptable level. They do say 4K 60. I don't know about 4K 60, and you're going to be somewhat bottlenecked with 8 gigabytes of VRAM out there. So that's something to think about. Now, here's the thing. What's the limitation right now on the Steam Machine? It's basically this. What are we looking at here? We're looking at the DDR5 pricing right now. Let's go DDR5 6000. They'll probably use slower speed memory, but the memory is all roughly priced the same right now. And it kaboom! right? I will say, and we'll talk more about this, you notice kaboom here, and now we're at a different slope. For those of you math nerds out there, the slope here would be like exponential, and then the slope here is more linear, still going up, but we'll talk more about those memory prices in just a second. Now, Newegg has a lot of combos right now for DDR4 systems, so I went ahead and pulled one out here, including that they've got this one for this basically Asrock box. It's a motherboard, it's everything. It comes with a power supply, all that stuff, and they're bundling it with a Ryzen 5500 CPU. Of course, this is a DDR4 setup. Obviously, they're going to use DDR5, but let's just assume that DDR4 on the open market is priced similar to what they're going to pay for DDR5. I mean, because they're going to get probably some kind of contract or volume discount at least for it. For $346 and 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, $346. Now, it doesn't come with an SSD. If they go with a 512 gigabyte SSD, those are running about $50 to $60 right now. It's about double what it was just a couple months ago for that storage, and that's without the GPU. If we go throw an RTX 5050 in there, about a $200, $250 GPU, you're at $650 for this. I just don't think that given the performance and given all this and given where RAM prices are going, especially the fact they're using DDR5, and DDR5 is the one that's really exploded. Not that DDR4 prices have stood still. They just have not increased to the level we've seen in DDR5 right now. So overall, I would have to say, I know a lot of people out there were like $399, and that may have been their initial price point for this thing. That being said, I don't think that now with the RAM crisis and now an SSD prices also going up, that they're going to be able to hit that. And of course, there's also a new rumor basically just got posted recently that Half-Life 3 launch is actually tied to the Steam Machine launch because they wanted this thing to launch together, kind of the way that Microsoft launched their consoles, or even, you know, if you think about Nintendo, they often launch it bundled with a particular game. I kind of think that's maybe where this was going. It's hard to say. Some of the reports in here, if we just scroll down to the report by Mike Straw, who's kind of an insider in the gaming industry, saying they're just unsure of the pricing because of those dang RAM prices out there. Guess what? SSD prices are also going up at the same time. So I just think they're going to be lucky to hit a price point around $650, which is where the PS5 Pro is right now. Of course, we know that likely when Sony runs out of the cheap RAM that it has stockpiled, most prices are going to go up. If you look at framework laptops have gone up. CyberPower PC is going to raise their prices. There's a report by Dell Alienware that their prices are massively going up as well. Maybe they have stockpiled a little bit of RAM. I'm talking about Valve. Maybe they have stockpiled a little bit of RAM and SSDs out there. But then once they burn through that, they're going to have to raise prices at some point. It's just really unfortunate. So I think overall, given that they're aiming for more casual audiences, not used to investing in the level of hardware that we're talking about and that we're used to investing in for higher performance gaming, they're going to be facing prices and they're going to be like, why does this cost so much more than a PlayStation? I can go buy a PlayStation. They're not going to know, well, that's because the PlayStation was manufactured with RAM, purchased on a contract when RAM prices were sane and storage prices were sane. They're not going to go through all that. So I think Valve has really got an uphill battle here, to say nothing of adoption of its operating system, potential bugs with its operating system, ironing all those kind of early adopter issues out. Again, that's not something that the console folks like to do. That's something that PC gamers will often put up with in a new generation, like the RTX 50 series, or there's a new generation of CPUs, big transition to DDR5 RAM. There were a lot of early hiccups on some of the early Intel platforms that used them. So I just think overall, they're just really paddling uphill on this one. I just don't see how they're going to get it done at an effective price point. And I got to tell you, I wouldn't be shocked to see that they punt this thing maybe into 2027. Our Anthony is to the knee. He wants to know, will AM4 make a comeback with RAM prices skyrocketing? Nathan adds to that, what about LGA1700 making a comeback too, since you can use both DDR4 and DDR5 with that? I think these are great ideas. However, I think the system integrators thought of them, but here's why it might seem like a good idea. Number one, 16 gigs of DDR4 RAM you can still pick up for about $100. for about $160 to $200, you can pick up 32 gigs of RAM. And while that might sound expensive, go check out DDR5 right now. It's anywhere from $350 to $400, obviously, if you don't get a combo deal. Now, let me show you these combo deals. This is over at Newegg. Newegg, you keep going with the combo deals. We absolutely love it. Fortunately, right now at the time of filming, no good DDR5 ones, but they have been pairing motherboards with RAM, with coolers, and basically giving massive discounts on all the other PC parts. So the RAM price is actually sane, and they've been really, really good. Again, right now, as I'm filming this, DDR5 sold out, but look at all the DDR4 ones out here. It's to the point where basically they're almost giving you these motherboards for free. They're like, hey, here's a free motherboard that we can't sell. You look at something like this one. This is for a B550 motherboard, perfectly fine ATX one by Asrock with 16 gigs of RAM. The RAM by itself is $104. They're basically just throwing in the motherboard for $25 on top of it. So it's actually a pretty good deal. And then if you wanted 32 gigs, you can go with this combo. This is insane. So you get a B550, a really high quality B550 motherboard. That's a tough one. I hadn't been recommending it for a while because it's kind of like, well, this is now a budget platform. Why would you spend extra on your motherboard? But they're basically only going to charge you $100 for the motherboard after the memory is $189. They're basically giving you the motherboard for $10 over and above the cost of the RAM. Again, it makes it kind of sane again. But here's our problem is that what CPUs are really available. So here we are in PC Part Picker. Let me blow this up a little bit. And this is basically all the Zen 3 processors out there that are available right now. And you can see the Ryzen 5500, which I continuously have now recommended after telling you at the beginning of the year, avoid that CPU. I've been recommending it in the last couple build guides because really it's $75. And if you pair it with a mid-tier GPU like a RX 9060 XE 16 gigabyte, which uses the full PCIe connector on the bottom of the GPU, most of these, including this one right here, the ARC B580, only uses half the connector, including a lot of the NVIDIA GPUs, all the way up to the 5070 is the first one that uses the full connector. Meanwhile, AMD's lineup uses the full connector on all of them. And that's why you're not having these PCIe Gen 3 or Gen 4 issues out there, or bandwidth issues, even with a CPU like the Ryzen 5500 for $75. But then, okay, Jason, I want to go with the 50. You would have to spend, and honestly, I think this 5600 here, it's a third-party seller at Amazon, probably doesn't really even exist. And let's jump over to Intel over here. Same issue, basically. If we get rid of all the Pentiums and the i3s, what do we really have here? The 12400F is $150, and that's back-ordered and not available a lot of places. You got to get a 12600K. You're now spending $170 to $200 on your CPU. You can get an AM5 CPU for that, but the problem is you can't get the RAM for that unless you get one of those combos at Newegg. So I would just say that I would love it to be a savior right now, but I think what's actually going on is that the system integrators, the people who put pre-builts together, figured this out about a month or two ago, because that's when these CPUs largely disappeared from store shelves, because they're probably buying them up en masse right now because they will use DDR4, and especially for those lower end systems using like an RTX 5060 or 5060 Ti, 96 XT, they can get away with these kind of lower end CPUs, basically DDR4 CPUs out there, and still put together those lower end systems to keep those costs low. But I think, unfortunately, we got beat to the punch on that one right now because I can't find these CPUs anywhere. Lock and Loaf asks, what is my personal preference for motherboard brands? Oh my goodness. So who are the brands out there? We've got Asus, Asrock, Gigabyte, MSI. To a lesser extent, then we got some smaller brands out there. NZXT uses boards that are basically made by Asrock. And then we've also got Colorfuls out there. We've got some smaller brands like Maxon and Sapphire, though those are largely been kind of dedicated to a China or Asia market, less so than the US. So I don't often get a chance to use those boards. In terms of the software, they all kind of suck. And the problem with their software often is that every cycle of motherboards and launches around CES, they come up with some new features in their motherboard software. It's going to overclock this. Right now, the big rage is like the X3D boost. They'll run that for a while. It may or may not increase their sales. And then they'll come up with the next gimmick and they'll kind of shift all their resources over to that. And this feature over here atrophies, doesn't really get used, and often starts causing problems with the overall software. And it's just like, MSI is really terrible about this, by the way. I actually like MSI motherboards, but their software, if you look at all the apps that you can download, it's just like, seems like there's 70 apps that all do the same thing. Why isn't it just one app? Well, because they wanted to have an AI cooling app in addition to the cooling app. It's like, I just need one freaking cooling app to control my fans, okay, and cool the PC. I don't need all this extra nonsense on it. Right now, the ones that I've been using most heavily is I use Asus in here. This is a Asus ROG Strix B650E-F motherboard I have with the Ryzen 7600X and a Radeon 7900 XT. Out there in the main room, we've got an RTX 4090 with a 7950X, and we have the Meg Ace out there, which has been a pretty good motherboard for it. It's an X670E motherboard. This is basically their flagship motherboard that cost $1 zillion when it first came out. I haven't used a lot of Gigabyte motherboards lately because a lot of their boards have been very ho-hum. In the AM5 generation, they dropped improved audio from a lot of their boards. Now they're bringing it back in a lot of their B850s. In fact, they're issuing a revision to their B850s just to bring upgraded audio back to a lot of those boards because they just offered cut down stuff. And then Asrock, their boards recently have had issues and we've kind of been moving away from them, mostly due to audience interest. Audience just doesn't seem as interested in the Asrock boards out there, which is unfortunate because their boards are so cheap. They're so cheap. They do such a great job at the low end. It's unfortunate they've had this issue with like 9800 X3Ds basically. And I will say, if you look, it's not like all the CPUs are dying. A small amount die on Asrock boards, but it's more than die on other boards. So why get an Asrock board? Just increase your chances. Why not get a board from somebody else? So I have to say, mostly I've been focused on MSI and Asus lately. And again, I'm not a big fan of their software. I absolutely love where the Tough brand has gone with like the B850s and the B650E motherboards. I think they've really dialed that into a much more value-oriented solution. Used to be a little too expensive, I felt. You're really aiming that one kind of more in the mid-range of gamers. And they've largely dropped a lot of their prime, I'm just gonna be honest, kind of their crap boards out there, right? If you look at other motherboard vendors, I think Gigabyte is starting to climb the ladder and come back. MSI has been really solid at all price points. Everything from the B650 Gaming Plus Wi-Fi, which we recommended the heck out of, all the way up to some of their higher end boards. I think maybe where they fall off a little bit is like their X870E boards just don't seem as feature competitive with other boards out there for the price you're paying. For the price, that's where Gigabyte has shined, I think, is X870E price to performance than they needed to. And unfortunately, Asrock is just kind of stuck in neutral right now until enough time goes by with these more recent BIOS updates so we can kind of see, is it still killing 9800 X3Ds out there? Is it not killing 9800 X3Ds? So right now, I think my preference will probably be a little bit more on the Asus side and MSI side with a couple of really solid Gigabyte boards thrown in there. Renzer asks, I just watched a Q&A back from Junior July when you answered the question of what is the right time to build or buy a PC. How do you look at market changes in retrospect right now? I want to build a new PC, but prices have changed so much over literally the last 2 months. Well, I'll answer your question in a second about looking backwards because that's not always as interesting. 2023, 2024 were incredible years to build gaming PCs. And I told you this during the shortage because I knew that when all the miners were selling their GPUs back in, it was going to be, as I called it, a golden age of PC building. We have largely seen that golden age of PC building. The late part of 2022, 2023 was incredible. 2024 was also very good. And honestly, much of this year was also pretty good once GPU prices started to settle down kind of around August or so. And then we had the RAM prices. But let's talk about something I think that's a little bit more interesting. When are the current RAM prices likely to settle out? Because right now, nobody knows for sure. Nobody knows for sure. But let's take a look at a graph. And this is, yes, this is the one we've all become familiar with. PC Part Pickers DDR5 6000. This is for a 32 gigabyte kit. This is their average pricing. I will say their average pricing, by the way, is a little weird because it's average of all the kits that they have on PC Part Picker, whether or not they were good value. And some of the kits just were never good value. So it's kind of artificially high, but it's a good kind of milestone for where prices are overall. And I don't have a better metric. But if we look, what do we get? This area here, when we kind of jumped up from late September until Black Friday, I believe that blue line is Black Friday, we basically went straight up. So what was happening then? Not only did we get big AI announcements that they're gobbling up all the RAM out there, OpenAI announced both with Samsung and SK Hynix the same day, locked up 40% of global memory out there, but then everybody panicked. And sometimes the right thing to do is panic, right? maybe even if we shouldn't even call it panicked or panic buying if you're smartly stocking up on something that's going to be hard to get for quite a while. Forget consumers for a second. All the OEMs out there that make laptops, that build gaming PCs, that need RAM for anything, everybody like kind of freaked out, and they, on a business level, went out to grab as much RAM as they could. The people who are always losing out in these situations are the people with the least power, and that's consumers, unfortunately, especially consumers that are directly buying the RAM and not buying any kind of large volume out there. So we don't have a lot of negotiating power, and this is what we were forced to suffer through, is a big spike going up here, right? What's going on now? You come to this part in December and see how the curve flattens out. The reason is a lot of that initial panic buying and everybody grabbing a limited asset is slowing down to some extent. Prices are still going up, but we see prices begin to level off. Now, what we would love to see is prices plateau and hit a new normal, right? So at least I feel like we then have a sense of, okay, if you're going to build a gaming PC, if you're going to do anything, this is the additional amount that you're going to have to pay, or at least this is the set amount that you're going to have to pay. It's not going to go up 2 weeks from now by $300 or something like that. So I think that's where we're at now. And then eventually, I think in the new year, because we do know that there's a little bit more production going on from some of these folks, but I would love to see some of these prices come back down. I think that may be possible probably in early spring of next year. Again, we've got to have some things go right. This is not telling you, I can very confidently tell you in 2021 or 2022, when I knew the date when Ethereum was going to go to proof of stake and they were no longer going to be able to be GPU mineable, that was the date where GPUs were going to start, prices were going to start to massively come down. I don't have that kind of date certain this time because, you know, if you know when the AI bubble is going to pop, that's probably going to be a pretty good date. It's been a kind of a real shift in the market very suddenly, and I think we're going to at least approach something that's going to feel a little bit normal than the nutcase situation we've been in for the past month or two. If you got value out of this video, please give it a like. It makes a huge difference to the channel. And of course, subscribe for more cool PC content. Like, did you check out our Q&A part 1? We talk all about the RAM crisis. Is PC gaming going to die because of RAM crisis, or is there hope on the horizon? And what do you need to be thinking about for your next PC build? Check it out, and we'll catch you on the next one.